The movie begins in a post-apocalyptic world, where we meet a mother and her two young sons, Sam and Nolan, living in isolation in a remote cabin. To protect themselves from an unseen malevolent force known as the Evil, they adhere to strict survival rituals. Before venturing outside, they tie themselves to the cabin using magical ropes, which their mother believes can shield them from the supernatural danger. They then venture into the forest for food. As they move cautiously through the dense woods, the mother spots a ghostly figure in the distance. Though visibly shaken, she avoids drawing attention to it, suppressing her fear to keep her children calm. While scavenging, she discovers an old photograph of her parents partially buried in the soil. Overcome with nostalgia, she hangs the photo on a nearby tree branch, a quiet nod to her family's history with the land. Meanwhile, the boys explore separately within the limits of their ropes. Samuel stumbles upon a discarded snake skin and decides to take it as a keepsake. Shortly after, he hunts a squirrel, securing it for their evening meal. He also cuts a branch to collect bugs for food, showcasing his survival instincts. Nolan, on the other hand, notices a solitary egg on the ground and sees it as an opportunity. However, his rope has reached its limit, preventing him from reaching the egg. Frustrated, he contemplates untying himself, but Samuel intervenes, warning him that it could be a trap set by the malevolent force. Though irritated, Nolan reluctantly heeds his brother's advice. As they regroup and begin to head back, Samuel trips over a hidden root and suffers a severe leg injury, breaking his bone. His agonized screams draw their mother's attention. She rushes toward the sound but is stopped by the length of her rope. Samuel, now separated from his rope, panics as he hears rustling noises in the nearby bushes, believing the entity is closing in on him. Defying the rules, Nolan unties himself to assist his brother, attempting to lift him to safety. Their mother reaches the limit of her rope and screams for the boys to return. Suddenly, a shadowy, supernatural entity emerges, moving toward the boys. Despite their terror, the boys cannot see the figure, which is visible only to their mother. With remarkable courage, she unties herself and rushes to them, wrapping her rope around all three of them. This act appears to repel the entity, which retreats into the darkness. Back at the cabin, the family's unity is tested. The mother, furious and desperate, throws the boys onto the wooden floor, demanding they recite their protective prayer. Overwhelmed with emotion, the boys comply, their voices trembling as they chant the sacred words. As the evening sets in, the mother diligently works on strengthening Samuel's rope after his earlier accident. Suddenly, the malevolent entity appears in the distance, watching her with an unnerving stillness. Its presence is unsettling, yet it doesn't approach. Later, the family gathers for a sparse dinner. The boys devour their portions with desperation, their hunger evident. The mother watches them with a mix of pity and determination, knowing she must keep them alive at all costs. To distract them from their dire circumstances, she shares a haunting story from her past. She recounts how, as a little girl, she encountered the entity. It had disguised itself as a crying child, its screams echoing through the forest for days. Despite knowing it was a trick, she eventually ventured out, only to find the entity still waiting, its cries growing more sinister. The boys listen intently, their faces pale with fear. The mother warns them again, the entity is always present, even if they can't see it. She emphasizes the importance of their ropes, explaining that if the spirit touches them without their ropes, it will possess them. Her voice quivers slightly, betraying her own fear. That night, the mother sends the boys to sleep in the basement, claiming it will cleanse their souls. The basement is cold and damp, its walls lined with faint scratches that suggest past struggles. While the boys are in the basement, the mother has another encounter with the entity. This time, it takes the form of her deceased husband, Papa. He appears in the shadows, his voice soft and familiar as he tells her he misses her. He asks to see the boys, but the mother doesn't respond, knowing it's a trick. The entity's tone shifts, becoming mocking and cruel. It promises to consume the boys and force her to watch. It whispers dark promises of making her harm her children, pushing her resolve to its breaking point. The next day, the family attempts to plant crops in the barren soil. Nolan struggles with the task, his small hands barely able to dig into the hardened ground. Mother steps in, her movements mechanical as she plants the seeds herself. Nolan hesitantly asks what would happen if the spirit entered the house. The mother's response is chilling, it would possess them, making them unalive one another. She explains that this is how the world ended, her voice heavy with despair. Nolan, still hopeful, suggests they leave the forest to search for other survivors. Mother dismisses the idea, insisting they are the last people alive. Her words carry an air of finality, crushing Nolan's hope. As days pass, their food supply dwindles further. The family is forced to share scraps, including tree bark and twigs. Despite the grim circumstances, they find a brief moment of joy, playing music and dancing together. It's a rare glimpse of happiness, their laughter echoing in the dimly lit house. That night, Mother catches Nolan sleepwalking. Startled, she quickly guides him back to bed, her worry etched on her face. The following morning, while hunting, she hallucinates seeing crows feasting on Nolan's face. She looks away, her breath hitching in panic. When she looks back, the vision is gone. Shaken, she returns home empty-handed and fries tree branches for dinner. The boys eat without complaint, their hunger overpowering their distaste. Later, Nolan finds himself alone in the forest, having sleepwalked again. He panics, calling out for his mother and brother. Realizing he doesn't have his rope, he freezes, his breath quickening. Suddenly, Mother appears and drags him back home. She throws him onto the wooden floor and demands he pray, her voice sharp with anger and fear. Nolan complies, his voice trembling. He begins to suspect that the evil spirit is a manifestation of his mother's deteriorating mental state rather than an external force. The next day, the mother brings out a wooden box containing belongings from her past. She shows the boys an old camera, explaining its function. She insists that one of the photos is of her, though it clearly isn't. The boys ask about their father, but Mother deflects, claiming he disliked being photographed. She abruptly changes the subject, revealing they've run out of food. She suggests they eat their dog to survive, prompting a heated argument. Nolan vehemently refuses, while Samuel sides with their mother out of fear. Later, the mother takes the dog to the shed, intending to unalive it. Nolan intervenes, cutting her rope and locking her in the shed. Trapped, Mother is confronted by the entity, which mocks her as a bad little girl. It accuses her of poisoning her children and moves closer, its presence suffocating. Overwhelmed, Mother choosing death over possession. Samuel finds her lifeless body, and Nolan is left in shock, the weight of their tragedy crushing him. The morning after their mother's tragic death, Nolan calls out for his dog, wandering through the forest. His voice echoes in the silence, but there's no response. That evening, Nolan attempts to make a meal with whatever he can find. He boils water and adds grass, crafting a meager substitute for food. He offers the drink to Samuel, but Samuel, still mourning their mother, remains distant and refuses to engage with him. The brothers' relationship, already strained, begins to crack further under the weight of their grief and the harsh realities of their situation. Determined to find sustenance, Nolan ventures deeper into the forest the next day. After walking for hours, he stumbles upon something extraordinary, a road. The sight of the road, unfamiliar yet filled with potential, sparks a glimmer of hope. It suggests the existence of other people and the possibility of a life beyond the forest. However, Nolan's rope reaches its limit, preventing him from exploring further. Frustrated and desperate, he screams for help, his cries echoing into the void. On his way back, Nolan encounters a hiker who claims to have heard his cries. The hiker appears friendly and offers assistance, but Nolan, wary of the evil's tricks, is hesitant to trust him. The situation takes a turn when Samuel appears. Overcome by paranoia and grief, Samuel immediately assumes the hiker is the evil that caused their mother's death. Acting on impulse, he shoots the man, unaliving him instantly. Nolan, horrified by his brother's actions, searches the hiker's belongings and finds food. Famished, he consumes it, describing it as the most delicious food he's ever tasted. He tries to share the food with Samuel, but Samuel refuses, convinced it is cursed by the evil. Nolan grows frustrated, pleading with his brother to see reason. He insists their mother lied about them being the only survivors and urges Samuel to accept that there is a world beyond the forest. However, Samuel's devotion to their mother's teachings clouds his judgment, and he rejects Nolan's logic. That night, hunger overtakes Samuel, and he secretly eats the food Nolan brought back. In the evening, a young girl arrives, searching for her father. She notices the flashlight Samuel holds and begins to suspect the truth. Pressured by her questions, Samuel admits to killing the hiker, blaming his actions on the belief that the man was the evil. Devastated, the girl runs off into the woods. Samuel chases after her, desperate to explain and seek forgiveness. As Samuel pursues the girl, she abruptly turns on him, revealing herself to be a manifestation of the evil. She infects him by forcing a dark, parasitic creature into his mouth. Samuel's screams echo through the forest as the entity takes control of him. Back at the house, Nolan realizes Samuel is missing and begins searching for him. He finds his brother, now possessed, acting erratically and consumed by the evil's influence. Samuel, under the evil's control, returns to the house and sets it ablaze. The fire spreads quickly, engulfing their home in flames. Nolan, trapped inside, fights to escape. In a desperate bid to save himself and confront the evil, Nolan faces the entity, which has taken the form of their mother. In a dramatic and surreal moment, Nolan locks himself and the entity in the crawl space, embracing it until it explodes, potentially signifying a release or destruction of the evil. Moments later, rescue helicopters arrive to airlift Nolan out of the woods. Make sure to like and subscribe for more notifications. Until next time, see you soon.